Hey everybody, my name is Alex, and this is Bento Radio. I almost screwed up and said the old version of the show, so it's obviously going well already. But before we get started with our episode today, I just wanted to do the normal upfront thing and remind you that if you really like the show, be sure to subscribe to it wherever you're finding it. That can be on any of your favorite podcast platforms. It can also be on YouTube. And if you want to see me and watch me talk about stuff, be sure to go to YouTube and search Bento Radio and find the show. And if you already have found the show, be sure to subscribe to the show so it shows up in all your feeds. If you really like the show, be sure to hit the notification bell so you get notified whenever new episodes drop. If you're wondering when that is, it's usually around 7 p.m. on Thursday night, unless I screw something up, which I've done in the past, but not a whole lot. And on that note, if you absolutely can't get enough of me for whatever reason, be sure to check out the show's site, which is bento-box.ghost.io. I publish articles every once in a blue moon over there. I've put articles that I've already written up there. There's episodes of the show over there. There's coverage of specifically Anime NYC 2025 over there that I am really proud of. So definitely go check all of that out. And the last thing I want to promote, which is actually very easy for you to find if you're listening to this or watching it, is my artist interviews. I've been trying to do one a month. The one this month was with an artist named Andrea, but his screen name is Andrew Cockroach, and he is exceptional. I also did an interview, which if you watched the two that you probably watched, you probably haven't watched the third one, which was with Phil Tomato. He's a really excellent artist who does a lot of fan art based stuff that's really excellent and really imaginative. And then I did a interview with Jessica Luna, aka Eat Slugs, although she's fading away from that screen name. We get into that in the interview because I straight up asked. But all three of the interviews are things I'm really proud of. I did those specifically because I wanted to do them for the exposure of the artist. In both Jessica's case and in Andrea's case, that was the first time anybody had interviewed them on camera, which I was really happy to do. You can tell if you watch Phil Tomato that he knew what he was doing. Not that any of them did badly in an interview, but he was the most concise and presentary-ish. And a lot of that is because he has a class that he's actively running all the time, and he takes a lot of pride in. So definitely go check out all of the interviews. Once again, you can either find them wherever you're listening to or watching this, or on that site, bento-box.ghost.io. There will always be that site link in the description of the podcast, either on YouTube or in the podcast app you're listening to this in. It'll be at the bottom of the description every time. It will also be in the description of the podcast proper, meaning the whole show page. If it's not, I'll make sure it's there. And it's also in the description of the YouTube channel, if you're on the YouTube channel page. So there's plenty of different ways to find that, and you can go explore that, and you can even subscribe. I should mention this more. You can subscribe for free to bento-box.ghost.io. It's a ghost newsletter site. So you can subscribe for free, and you can get stuff whenever I publish it, since I publish it there primarily and every time. So whenever a new episode drops, you'll get it in your email, which is a great option. So definitely go do that if you're really enthusiastic about what I'm trying to do with all this. And on that note, let's jump into the show we're talking about this week, and that is a little show from a long time ago at this point called Hajime no Ippo. So I'm going to toss it over to my lovely assistant Ai to give us a nice, succinct plot synopsis. Take it away, Ai.
Makunuchi has all helping his mother run their family's fishing business. Shy and often bullied, he's spent most of his days wondering what strength truly means. Everything changes the day he's rescued by Mamoru Takamura, a rising star in the boxing world. Inspired by Takamura's confidence, Ippo steps into the Kamigawa boxing gym and discovers something inside himself he never expected. A natural talent and a heart that refuses to quit. With the guidance of the gruff but wise coach Kamigawa, Ippo begins a journey fueled by determination, kindness, and pure fighting spirit. As he trains, he learns that boxing isn't just about power. It's about heart, courage, and the will to stand back up no matter how many times you fall. Through fierce matches, new friendships, and unforgettable rivals, Ippo gradually grows from an unsure boy into a boxer who inspires others. His story is one of quiet bravery, proving that even someone who once felt powerless can rise, punch by punch, toward a dream that finally belongs to them.
So, with the plot synopsis out of the way, I wanted to tell you up front here that I lied a little to you in the last episode. Because I said, when I was talking about the Hobby-Ganda shows, and in specific, Ruri Rocks, if you haven't listened, if you haven't listened to that episode, it makes a good companion for this episode, so if you're interested, go check that out. But the thing I lied about was that if I was going to gravitate to any sport, it would probably be basketball. And while that is true on a level, it's not entirely true, because the sport, or the segment of sports that I've gravitated to my whole life, is combat sports. And I'm not talking about jiu-jitsu, but I am talking about martial arts. I've done bits and pieces of capoeira, taekwondo, karate, and recently I have every week been going to a boxing gym. And that's relevant to this episode because that's what Hajime no Ippo is principally about. And if you know anything about boxing, it's not that all combat sports don't have their peccadillos and uniqueness, but boxing is in a slightly different place than karate or, say, taekwondo or something like that, or even mixed martial arts, which incorporates a lot of stuff from a lot of different places. And there are different types of boxing, like there's kickboxing, and then there's normal, traditional American boxing, like you think of Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, Logan, one of the Paul brothers, I forget which one. Neither of them are worth remembering in my brain, and I like it. I really enjoy it, because I don't know if you can tell, but I am a biracial, physically disabled guy who is raised by a single mother, and going through the world that tends to cause the buildup of a fair amount of annoyance, at the very least, and deep-seated anger at the very most. And a thing that combat sports do for a lot of people, including a character in Hajime no Ippo, although not Ippo himself, is they give you an outlet for that, a place to point that sharp, useless anger. And that's part of the reason why I started doing it. The reason why I kept doing it is because I found myself really liking it. And not necessarily because of the dopamine hit of going to a gym and working out, doing the things that you should do to give you dopamine instead of watching a YouTube video, or even worse, and this is going to be hilarious when this gets cut up into one, YouTube short, but going and working out and learning to kick ass and kicking my own ass in the process. And it's not like I don't dislike the pain at the end, but I like the training, and I'll get into why a little bit in a moment, but I like the training, there's a sense of community there, and one of the things I think is really interesting about Hajime no Ippo as a sports anime that captures both of those things really well. The training is interesting to Ippo, and it is fun on some level to Ippo, but also hard in a way that's still worth it. And in the show, when Ippo comes in and joins Kamigawa Gym, he gains all the people who are already part of that gym. He gains a rival in the form of Miyata, and friends in form of Tomomura, the heavyweight boxer who brings him in initially, but also all the Dateiji and all the extended cast. And later on, even some opponents turn to him and call him a friend. And that has happened for me. There are people who go on the same day as I do every week, and we see each other, and we talk, and we catch up, and while we have a good time, it's it's fun. It's genuinely fun. And I think that, so last week I talked about the kind of propaganda show, which sprang, in my belief, a lot of times from the kind of shonen sports anime, which Hajime no Ippo totally is. And in talking about that, talking about both sports anime and propaganda anime, the point is to make you want to do the thing. But in so many shonen sports anime, the way they approach that is much less rooted in what's possible and what you can do. And there is some of that, like the Dempsey Roll in this show is this kind of signature move by maybe the second season of the show. He has this move called the Dempsey Roll, which is inspired by an actual real boxer named Patrick Dempsey. And essentially involve, like, into punches repeatedly, almost so fast it becomes like you're getting hit by shots from a gun. And it's most fantastical that this show gets, other than when gets into a fight in the woods with a bear, thing that happens for much of the latter half of the show. He has a big scratch scar on his chest because he fought and won against a bear. But, most kind of gets is in the actual fights, when once Ippo gets in the ring and starts competing, they make the hits like they're getting the absolute soul knocked out of the back of their skull. It's incredible. It's like clearly exaggerated, especially once you've seen actual boxers do their thing. But it's also, like, it gives you an idea of, like, just how hard these guys are going at each other, even if they're just competing for the love of competition. Like, because they like you doesn't mean they're gonna pull a punch. And so there's all that, but it's really interesting to think about the show now for me, because once again, I do this every week. I record these shows in advance so I can edit them and get them out on time. And at the time of recording this, the footage that I put in about that shows me in the gym was recorded the next day, or maybe even I got lucky and got to record some of my sparring sessions, but which is the day after. But now having done it, now having given into the propaganda aspect of all of these shows, I get it. It makes sense. And it's not that it doesn't make sense in the show proper, because where Tomomura, the heavyweight boxer, brings Ippo in after seeing that he was being bullied by fellow classmates, and kind of pushing back against it, after Tomomura brings him in, you learn that Tomomura was a very typical idea of, like, hard scrabble kid who found kind of life that would accept him in boxing. And they style Tomomura like this. Tomomura's a big dude. He's at least almost 6 feet tall. He has a big old pompadour haircut. He dresses like a Japanese gangster. But his thing that saved him from lifestyle that would, like, him down the path of being a shitbag was boxing. And you see that in him, like his kind of practical joker going sometimes up the line and sometimes over the line with his jokes. But boxing gives him a way to be exceptional in a way that's not available necessarily to him elsewhere. I just finished reading book The Last Yakuza by Jake Alcine, and follow each other actually on Threads. But I mentioned I posted about the section of the book, spoiler alert, for Last Yakuza. You should read it or listen to it on, if at all possible. It's fascinating and it's a great read. There's this scene in the book where the main character, Saigo, essentially walks up to Om Shinrikyo's compound and takes the chief press representative's car in full view of the cops. So hardcore that the cops essentially, like, let him do it, and they're like, we don't see anything here, we're gonna go take a smoke break over in that corner. Let us know when you're done, though. What they do essentially they're like, let us know when you should turn our body cams back on, kind of. And don't get me wrong, organized crime are still members of organized crime. They're not doing things that are strictly legal. But so many of the anecdotes in that show, in that book, feel like wacky hijinks that go up to a certain line and don't cross that line. There's another great moment in that book where Saigo essentially, a bunch of people in his little fiefdom together, puts them on motorcycles and has them deliver ice cream in traffic in the middle of summer, and basically they become roving illegal ice cream salesmen. And it's like, no, they're not. Like, he's buying the ice cream, storing it, and like off the back of motorcycles to willing people. Like, he's not forcing people's ice cream on people if they don't want it, and eventually they don't for a different reason. He doesn't like come down and be like, well, you could just buy this drumstick for an inflated price and then I'll leave you alone. No, he becomes an ice cream salesman. He becomes a fly-by-night ice cream salesman, essentially. And eventually the cops catch him on something like, and between that and the Om Shinrikyo car theft thing, I got the sense, and throughout the entire book, I get the sense that, like, it's him, but for so many characters in that book, they weren't all good or all bad. They just didn't have, there was no framework for them. And yes, they were dumbasses on some level, but there was no framework to allow them to, like, the thing they were. The reason why I'm bringing this up in the case of Tomomura is, like, it's very clear in the show that he's acceptable because he became a great boxer. If he wasn't a great boxer, he would probably be a criminal. And so that's one really interesting path the show shows. But the main one it shows is Ippo, the titular character, who eventually becomes the featherweight champion, I believe, of the world, because once again, this is a sports anime. It is also a hobbyganda anime, as all sports anime are. They want to show you the heights of what's possible, not just show you the, like, stuff. And they do a much better job in this show than in other shows of doing that, because, let me tell you as somebody who does it every week, so much of boxing is not about fighting, it's about training. And, like, training, and keeping your weight down, like, in the right way. Training a lot, just a incredible shit ton of endurance training. So much endurance training, it would stun you. Basically, most of it is endurance and strength training. But the difference is that with Ippo, he's not aggressive in the way that, like, Tomomura is very much like a Mike Tyson. He is this, like, force, and that's what allows him to be, like, the heavyweight champion of the world at some point in the show. But Ippo gets there in a very different way. He gets to be featherweight champion in a very different way. He gets to be featherweight champion by relentlessly training and, like, honing his body. And here's where I want to talk about another kind of between me and this show, besides just the fact that I now box once weekly. I now go to a boxing gym once weekly. And that is that when Tomomura brings Ippo in, and Ippo throws punch really for the first time, there's, like, a tremendous thing because Tomomura shows Ippo exactly how to, like, into a punch and swing from your hips and go for it. Ippo does that, and he knocks the punching bag clean off the chain it's hanging on. And it's like a huge deal. And what the show shows you, it doesn't just tell you this, it shows it to you explicitly, is that the reason why Ippo can do that is his body has been kind of built to be good at this. Because he has essentially been doing strength and endurance training since he was, like, middle school. Because he helps his family's fishing boat load up and unload every day before and after school. And when I say before and after school, I'm morning at, like, in the morning. He wakes up and he, like, himself down with bait and fishing gear and, like, then all this other stuff. And he just, like, get onto the boat, puts it down where it needs to be, and then when they come back in, after he's done with school, he unloads everything and puts it away. He has been doing the kind of strength training that you would want to do as a boxer for most of his life. He just hasn't had like a specific avenue to point it down. And there's this dumb meme, I might find it and put it up, but a black guy puts a egg, you probably already know what I'm doing, but for those of you, puts an egg in the crook of his elbow, and and it crushes the egg, and he just looks at the camera and goes, "I'm built different." And the entire internet has kind of on that dude. But I'm telling you right now, he's not. I meaningfully am. Most disabled people, if you know a disabled person, he was literally built different than anyone else. And the way I really kind of that was the first time I went to any kind of trainer, not necessarily the trainer of my boxing gym, although I love the guy. But when I went to my first kind of class, because the gym I joined does a trial class where you can go once for free to see if it's your thing. If it's not, no harm, no foul. It's not only a way for you to try it and for them to get their hooks in you, but for you to try it and probably them not have to like go into the system and deal with that. So I totally get it. But when I threw the first punch, my trainer was like, "Do you have experience? You threw a good serious punch. That was a serious punch." And even now he probably could say give you more advanced pointers, but there's like a whole level of stuff I don't need to tell you because you just know. And at some point later on, he said take instruction really well. I went and I simply told them because I know my body really well, and I know I have a level of control that is really adept and really beyond what most people experience with their bodies, because they haven't had to use their bodies in the way that I've had to. And going forward in training, my trainer, who also is what you call an in-fighter, which is you fight close up rather than far away, kind of me towards being more of that in-fighter. And part of the reason why he said that was because I'm more flexible up close than a lot of people. I can have confidence in what I'm doing because I just have more raw control over what happens next. And yeah, me, once I go into sparring, lots of stuff, and this happens with everybody, no matter how good you are, goes out the window. But Ippo has the same kind of thing going on. He has that training, that awareness that came from core strength training, and now it's all about polishing it, and for much of the show it's about polishing it and making it and repurposing it into something new. And for the entire show, he goes to the boxing gym, but he wakes up, he loads up his stuff into the he helps his family load up the fishing gear, and then he goes for a run in a sweatsuit. And then he goes to the gym and trains. And one of the really cool things that lots of sports anime struggle with is continuing beyond the initial setup. And what I mean there, this is for a couple reasons. The first reason is because at some point the power scaling becomes kind of pointless, because this includes Hajime no Ippo actually. All of those kind of sports anime are also in their mold and tradition of shonen action anime, of shonen battle anime. Less separating Dragon Ball Z and this show than there are separating this show and Pokemon, if that makes any sense. And because of that, shows like, say, Kuroko's basketball, by the time you get to the, challenger team in the show, it's kind of worn out its welcome, if that makes any sense, a little bit. It's gotten old. You understand that these are really talented players, and it's a big deal that, I think it's Saren High is about to go up against them. But it doesn't feel the same way as the first initial part of that show, where Serenhai is fighting off against, with other members of the Generation of Miracles on each team. But in this show, what this show pulls off, and what's really interesting, is it pulls off that second jump really well. And the second jump looks like introducing a whole new class of characters who are the class of characters that Ippo was in the very beginning, who are the characters who are like the new, fresh face to the Tomogawa gym. And the other thing a good version of this kind of arc should do is it should highlight how much the character's grown, and it show does a wonderful job of that. But it does it without it feeling mean or unearned, and it does it without it feeling rushed either. And there's the show to be finished. Everybody's when I went looking for characters for the show, the first thing that popped up was Hajime no Ippo Season 4, and it's been on hiatus for a long while. I remember seeing this thing for the first time when I was in college, which would have been 2008 to 2010. Went to 2-year college, and I distinctly remember sitting at my desk, I always had a very elaborate desk setup. I have basically a pile of screens with a computer somewhere behind it that run off. But at the time, I think I had my laptop. I had one nice independent monitor that I had acquired from my college. And then I had completely independent, unconnected to the rest of the setup, but I still used it and transfer files with a flash drive from it. Old iMac, the old turtle shell colored iMac. I just had that thing and ran that thing for various reasons. People would come into my apartment, my apartment, because we had apartments in our school. And they would see, a drafting table was just the drafting table and, a laptop off to the side. And they would see mine, and genuinely everybody's question would be you have so many computers. Why do you need so many computers? I'm I use them all, so whatever. But I used to sit in the mornings and eat breakfast and watch Hajime no Ippo. And, I have vivid memories of sitting in front of my big setup and one screen, and the biggest screen was just playing Hajime no Ippo as I ate my breakfast in the morning before class. So this show has been going for quite a while at this point. But the thing that's great about it is that, like I said, so many of these shows are shown in anime by way of sports. That's true of Haikyuu, that's true of Kuroko's basketball, that's true of even something like Hinomaru Sumo, which is an actual shonen action anime, a shonen sports anime about sumo that is actually pretty good, especially because that show is not afraid to let its main character just get fucked up in the process of the show. I think the show even ends on the main character, Hinomaru, I believe, losing, which is a really exceptional thing to do in those kinds of shows, because it's a much more honest look at the sport than even something like this show, Hajime no Ippo, because Hajime no Ippo does a good job of this, and any boxing show worth its salt would have to do a good job of it, and Hajime no Ippo by no means is the first or only boxing anime. If I had to guess, the first boxing anime is probably, and don't quote me here, I could be very wrong, a show called Joe in English, but Ashita no Joe in Japanese, and that was later made into a 10th anniversary project called, I have the first box set of it, Megalobox, which is an exceptional show that I'll probably talk about at some point, but not now. But just to focus again on Hinomaru Sumo for a second, because the point, I think, was important. The thing that Hinomaru Sumo does by having its main character lose in the end is it shows that, winning isn't the point. The winning for Hinomaru isn't always the point. The point is to prove it to himself and to everyone else that he is worthy of being a competitor. And in the show, in that particular show, they have wrestlers who are considered to be, who are called national treasures, and each one of them is given a nickname based on a national treasure weapon in Japan. And, like, had a nickname, the character named, like, the Naginata or something, who I think is the guy he loses to. But he's a force in that show for the entire time. And even more so in the manga, where I believe he becomes the shortest Yokozuna ever or something, period of time. But the point of that show really becomes about, like, his craft and, like, being not just competitive, but competitive with himself. And, like, competition isn't always outward facing. And a lot of any good sports anime about a combat sport is going to be about the training. So that's that's a thing that's very true of Hinomaru Sumo, but also very true of Hajime no Ippo. Hajime no Ippo is a show about training. And like I said earlier, there's so much training in this show, in boxing. The majority of it is training to learn how to, as the head of the gym I go to, beat people up. That almost the fight is almost like a sweet treat at the end. Like, it's not my trainer, the guy who is there every Tuesday, who oftentimes, if he thinks I'm not being pushed enough, will just walk over to me like, put this weight vest on and don't take it off until you leave. Which he's done a couple times, which sucks. Is so genuinely knowledgeable and excited to answer questions and, like, about the training, but the fight is almost secondary. I'm sure, don't get me wrong, I'm sure he loves to get in the ring and mix it up, but it's not entirely the point. When I was there first, by far the thing I wanted to do the least was the speed bag. And that's the, like, shaped bag that hangs down and, like, always see people going like this, and it goes. And part of the reason I didn't like doing it was because it is a thing that is instinctively made for you to do it with two hands, and I only have one capable of punching, much less doing the speed bag. It's very specific, like rotating at the elbow all the time. It's about rhythm, it's about applying rhythm and keeping that rhythm. I used to chase the bag, I used to have to stop it all the time, I couldn't keep the rhythm when I first did it, and now I do a thing in the circuit of training drills that I do every week. And it's just, I stand there and I go at the speed bag for a 30-second round. Most of 30 minutes, I can't imagine doing it for 30 minutes. The only thing that bothered me is my tight-ass shoulder doesn't love it after a while, but that's what the gummies I take after training are for every week. But so much of Hajime no Ippo is about the training, and even more than most shonen anime shows, you see him forming like his special moves, like the Dempsey Roll. They take you through the whole process of him training to learn how to do that, and of the coach, and Tomogawa, like, being hard on him, and, like, him to, like, and this is, like, the motion he does, but it's much deeper and more intentional, under this, like, he puts up for him to train with, and he's like, no, faster. It's now start throwing punches at the top end of each one. And it feels... none of the things that they have anybody do in this show feel superhuman. They feel unique. They feel like you need to train to do them, but they don't feel superhuman. They feel like I said, unique and like they're earned and important. And that's the other really excellent thing about this show, is that it's not... I think this is part of what helps it not become so stale so quickly, is that it doesn't rely on a power system necessarily. You know, scalers, which is a big thing across the internet. Everybody wants to power scale everybody against everybody else. But a lot of the way they can do that is the power systems that are applied in different shows. And the kind of something like Kuroko's No Basket, or even something like Haikyuu, allow for a little bit more playfulness there that Hajime no Ippo just doesn't. The featherweight champion of Japan and Ippo are equally matched because they're standing in the ring with each other. One of them better than the other one, but like is just as much a matter of luck and of preparation as anything else. There's no one's going to throw an energy bomb ever in a show like this, and that I think helps it get away from the problem that I talked about with basketball, in that like not watching two superpowered people go at it. You're watching a genuine boxing match. And I talked about earlier that the like big thing they do over blow is they apply like jet sound barrier breaking noises to the punches. And when somebody hits somebody else in the show, in order to like illustrate the impact, you see like sort of air shoot out in all directions when somebody hits somebody else. That's done to help recreate the genuine feeling of watching a boxing match, of like, who's gonna win. And whereas lots of other shows, lots of other shonen anime will, like, later seasons lean on their supporting cast in some way, like Kuroko's basketball, you have the blonde guy going up against the blue-haired guy, and that's a big deal. The kind of the main arc, but only for now, and then we'll get back to the other thing later. Show can do that, and those fights feel just as tense and just as important as the other ones, as the ones that came as Ippo's. You know, fights feel just as important. You know, the like squad of friends, their matches feel just as important because you're always watching a boxing match. And that exaggeration on the hits helps that feel important because that exaggeration gets you to be in the same place as watching a professional boxing match. I've also been to a couple amateur boxing matches at this point too, and I've seen people who are like and fighting and winning in training, like the burst and the jet engine sound, who adds the kind of suspense of like two very skilled boxers just go at it completely, even in sparring, is pretty exciting. I've seen that a bunch of times now. On that note, like the show, I believe it's on, I think you can watch it on, where I'm going to leave it.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and if you did, be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening or watching. If you're listening to it on a podcast platform and they allow you to give a 5-star review, be sure to do that. If you're watching this on YouTube and you really liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and like the video. In addition, if you want to make sure that you don't miss a beat, be sure to hit that notification bell so you know when new episodes drop. But if you're wondering, they drop every Thursday night Eastern time. And on that note, if you really love the podcast and you really love what I'm trying to do here, be sure to give the website a look. That website is bento-box.ghost.io. There will be a link in the description of either this podcast or this video. It'll also be linked in the description of the entire podcast on the information page. It'll also be linked in the description of the YouTube channel. So there's plenty of ways for you to get to that website and check it out. If you want to follow me, my social links are also listed in the footer of that page. So once again, go over there to find that stuff. But I hope you liked the episode. I look forward to talking to you next time. But until next time, I have been Alex. This has been Bento Radio, and I'll talk at you later.